afternoon. Welcome back. We got a whole group of guests along the wall. Where are y'all from? Where? UPA? Where's UPA? We don't know where that is. What's UPA? Here, wait. I'll go find out. This is not working very well. Where are y'all from? San Jose. What school?
UPA.
What's the UPA stand for?
University Preparatory Academy.
Ah, University Preparatory Academy in San Jose. Anybody else in the room from San Jose? Louder, louder, louder. There you go. All right. Anybody in the room go to UPA? Nope. Sorry about that. Well, other people from San Jose. So you're welcome. We're going to start with some clicker questions. They have, we're just starting a new part of the course, and my microphone's going to fall off, so you can see all sorts of interesting tech things today. Somebody can even tell me this thing's falling off the ear again. I don't know what it is. All right. First clicker question. Review questions, because we just finished up the micro. Firms in what type of industries maximize profit by producing a quantity where marginal revenue equals marginal cost? A, B, C, D, or E? The volume of me is not up high enough, or is that too loud? It's too soft. Can you hear me in the back? So they want me a little louder. Okay. All right, firms in what types of industries? 3 seconds. 1, 2, and 3. Let me move this up. I can reach it. All right. Firms in what type of industries? Back. Ink color. Choose color. There we go. D. Ooh, 93%. Happy face. Good job. All right, next one. Taxpayers in the 5-county BART district pay taxes that cover part of the cost of providing BART service. What concept is most relevant here? Monopoly, monopolistic competition, externalities, asymmetric information, and yes, there is a midterm in 9 days. You know, once the semester starts, it just kind of runs along. There's 5 of these review questions today. So now, are you guys also from UPA in San Jose, or are you from somewhere else? Also UPA. How many of y'all, where's the teachers? Teachers, how many did you bring? 109. Wow, that's a big field trip. Well, welcome to Berkeley. Here we go. All right, 3 seconds. 1, short seconds. 2, and 3. All right, what are they doing? Good job. 91%. Get the happy face. So that's a form of a subsidy to encourage people to ride BART. That if we expected the riders to cover the entire cost of using public transit, we would produce too little public transit relative to what society wants, and that's why we have subsidies in the form of taxes paid by those who benefit, even if they're not riders. Next one. In what type of industries does an increase in demand cause an increase in price? In what type of industries does an increase in demand cause an increase in price? Perfect competition, monopoly, monopolistic competition, all of the above. A, B, C, D, or E. So usually I start with like 2 or 3 clicker questions, but because we're right at the transition between micro and macro, I'm starting with 5 today. I'm telling this to the UPA students around the edges because they don't know how we usually run this thing. All right, 3 seconds. 1, 2, and 3. And what do we got? Oh, good. Making progress. Not quite as good. We got 81%, but that's still a pretty good happy face. So whether it's perfect competition, monopoly, or monopolistic competition, go back and draw the graphs. In any of those industries, if you increase demand for the product, it's going to lead to an increase in price. That's one of the reasons that we teach you that basic supply and demand model first, even though that basic supply and demand model applies directly only to perfect competition. The conclusions that we get out of it, more demand, higher price, less demand, lower price, and so on. The conclusions that we get out of that model of supply and demand apply even when perfect competition is not the right description of the industry. And so since that's a nice, clean, simple model, we always start there because it's not useless if assumptions are not satisfied. It still gives you some good starting points for understanding how even much more complex industries work. All right, number 4. Which of these pairings is correct? A, employers don't know which of their workers is high quality and which is low quality. That's adverse selection. B, employers offer a low wage, and so high quality workers don't apply for the job. That's adverse selection. C, employers don't know which of their workers is high quality and which is low quality. That's moral hazard. D, employers offer a low wage, and so high quality workers won't apply for the job. That's moral hazard. Or E, I don't know. A, B, C, D, or E. Which of those pairings is correct? So they're the asymmetric information definitions. We want to see which one is correct. 3 seconds. 1, 2, and 3. You're evenly split between a right answer and a wrong answer. The fact that employers don't know which of their workers is high quality and which is low quality, that's asymmetric information generally. That's the fact that there's differences in information between the employers and the workers. The workers have a sense of how hard they're going to work, and they don't necessarily reveal that to the employer. The adverse selection aspect is the notion that the pool of applicants is an adverse or unfavorable sample of the whole population. And that's B. So that the offering a low wage means that the applicant pool is disproportionately going to have low quality workers in it. Or put it the other way, the applicant pool is disproportionately not going to have the high quality workers. Because the high quality workers know they're high quality workers and know they don't have to work for a below market wage. So the correct answer here was B. And we had basically 45 on A and 45 on B. So we got 46. So we get 46% happy face. The other half of you were on A, which is not right, but you at least were evenly split between the 2. All right, last one. Some of your GSIs may have already told you the answer to this one. On midterm 1, students who spent the most study time writing out answers to old midterm questions. So I asked you, what did you spend your most time on? Those who spent the most time writing out answers to old midterm questions scored on average how many points more than the average for the class as a whole? So if your study strategy was that active learning strategy, did that boost your score? A, 0, it made no difference. B, it boosted scores on average by 1.5, 3, 4.5, or 6. A, B, C, D, or E. Do active learning strategies help? 3 seconds. 1, 2, and 3. D. So what we found when we did the analysis was that for those of you who answered my clicker question by saying that you had spent the most time writing out answers to old midterm questions as opposed to rereading the notes, re-listening to the webcast, and all these other activities that you could have done that were passive learning activities, those of you who spent most of your time on active learning strategies boosted your scores by about 5 points over the rest of those who did not use active learning. So guess what we think you should do to prep for the next midterm? Okay. All right. Okay. So today, what are we starting today? Today we're starting macroeconomics. We spent the first half of the course talking about microeconomics, and now we switch over and talk about macroeconomics. When we talk about macroeconomics, instead of talking about the market for bottled water or the market for Cal football tickets or the market for yogurt or the market for any of these other markets that we've talked about over the semester so far, we're talking about the economy as a whole. Now, when we say the economy as a whole, what do we mean by as a whole? Usually, when people teach macroeconomics, the whole that they're talking about is the national economy. So in our case, it would be the U.S. economy. The tools that we will learn can be used to understand any aggregation of a whole bunch of markets. So we could use these tools to understand the Bay Area economy. We could use these tools to understand the Pacific Rim economy. We could use these tools to understand the economy of the world. Most of the data that I'm going to show you and the data that you'll work with in section today and tomorrow are national data for the United States. But these tools are applicable to any aggregation. So it's not just about the U.S. It's not just about a national economy, but it's about looking at some aggregation, summing together, looking at all at once in one breath, a whole bunch of different markets. There's 3 main topics that we look at when we study macroeconomics. One is long-run economic growth. I'm going to show you a few charts. We already did long-run economic growth. When we talked about shifting out the production possibilities frontier, that was looking at this topic of long-run economic growth. So we've actually already done the first topic. the long-run economic growth topic. I'll review it real fast in a couple of minutes. The second major topic of macroeconomics is unemployment, looking at the determinants of why currently 5.9%, so around 6% of the population that's looking for work can't find work. So talking about what determines not unemployment in the bottled water industry or unemployment in the sugarcaning industry, but what determines the levels of unemployment for the economy as a whole, whether that's defined as a national economy, a regional economy, or something else, some aggregate economy. And then the third topic of macroeconomics is inflation. Inflation talks about prices and what's happening to prices. Here again, we're not concerned with the price of a bottle of water. We're not concerned with the price of a Cal football ticket. We're not concerned with the price of a BART ticket. We're concerned with on-average prices. So some number that is an average of all of the prices of the things that we buy. And when we talk about inflation, we're not focused on particular markets. We're focused on what's happening on average to the prices of things that we buy. Now, as we do macroeconomics, we've got new meanings of short and long. So we had the phrases short run and long run in microeconomics, and they had very precise definitions when we talked about the short run and the long run in microeconomics. So up until today, when we talked about the short run, we were talking about the short run as it applied to a particular market or a particular firm, and it was a time that was so short they couldn't change the amount of capital. They couldn't change the amount of machinery they had. They couldn't change the size or the number of buildings that they were using for production or sales. And that was our definition of short run. Very specific definition. Differs in terms of the number of months, right? So selling jewelry on Telegraph, the short run may be a month or less. Manufacturing cars in Ohio, the short run maybe a year or more. They have a very specific definition. For macroeconomics, they're more loosey-goosey. They're not so precise, the definitions of short run and long run. For macroeconomics, the long run is decade to decade, so every 10 years, or sometimes generation to generation, and we figure a generation is 20 to 25 years. So when we talk about long run economic growth, we're talking about looking at averages over, say, the 1970s versus the 80s versus the 90s versus the aughts versus the 10s, so decade to decade. Or we may even be talking about looking at the economy of your lifetime versus your parents versus your grandparents, so generation to generation. So there's not one definition of how long is the long run. It's a long time. Short run, a year or two, something like that, a couple of years, maybe a little more, maybe a little less. So kind of loosey-goosey. Doesn't have a precise definition the way that we did with microeconomics, but still has some clear understanding. So the short run, when we talk about the short run in macro, we're talking about what's going to happen between now and, say, the end of the school year. All right. So when we think about long run, the long run economy, so we said one of our topics in macro is long run economic growth, we can distinguish between economic growth, economic stagnation, and economic decline. So we do that with a picture. On the vertical axis, we're going to put output. So that's going to be a measure of the total amount of goods and services produced in an economy over a year. So we're going to add up the dollar values of the bottles of water, the football tickets, the automobiles, the lawyer services, all that kind of stuff. Total value of output produced. And then here, no, do not fail me. No. There it comes. Good. Over here, we're going to put time. Speaking of which, was the internet out in other buildings besides Evans? Okay. So I don't know if you saw the tweet that I put out. The people who are in charge of the internet for campus are down on 4th Street in Campus Shared Services, and they got rid of all their landlines, and they have internet-based phone service. So we cannot send them an email because the internet's out, and we cannot call them because their phone service is internet-based. Not my system. Okay, so if we look at the amount of output that's being produced over time, and here we're looking decade to decade or generation to generation, and if that's increasing, we say that's an economy that's experiencing economic growth. So if the amount of output that's being produced is increasing over time, we say that's an economy experiencing economic growth. If the amount of output that's being produced is staying about the same, so it's about the same for you as it was for your parents, about the same for your parents as for your grandparents, that's stagnation. That's an economy that's stagnating. And if it's going down, so the standard of living for you is worse than the standard of living for your parents, the standard of living for your parents' generation, for your generation, and your parents' generation, and your grandparents' generation, getting worse as you go along. Growth, stagnation, and decline. Now, we can see this in real life. So here compares on the top line is Sweden, and the bottom line is Argentina. And here, what we have on the vertical axis is not just output, but a better measure. We've got output per capita. So output divided by the number of people, persons, why not? And you can see that Argentina and Sweden were going along at about the same pace in terms of what was happening to the amount of output per person from 1900 until around 1940, and then Sweden takes off and Argentina stagnates. So those are the big questions that we deal with in long-run growth. Why do some economies experience strong growth, like Sweden, and other economies stagnate, like Argentina? If we look at the United States, we see a picture like this. This is a picture of the standard of living. Standard of living, again, is output divided by the number of people, output per person, output divided by population. And that's showing you the trend line. I'm going to show you the actual numbers in just a minute. That's the trend line for the United States from 1900 to 2014. And you can see the United States has experienced pretty good economic growth over that 114-year period. We've already talked about the sources of difference in economic growth. Economic growth, remember, is due to increases in the quantity of inputs, labor, land, capital, or increases in the productivity of those inputs, or productivity generally. And those increases in productivity, remember, there was a long list that gave us increases in productivity. Yes, technological change, but also there were things like whether the judiciary is seen as being a fair judiciary, what's the transportation network like, what's the financial network like, what are the political institutions like, is there a smooth transition from one regime to the next, and I forget what the other ones were, and all those other things that we listed a month or so ago as the causes of economic growth. So we've already talked about this. We did it back in September, and so we don't need to spend any more time on it. That sort of is a check mark. We've done the first topic of macroeconomics. How's that? Here's the same picture for real GDP. Instead of having just that trend line, which is now the gold line, it also includes the actuals. So this is looking at the, where's the little red thing? So now along the vertical axis, I changed my vertical axis again. Now along the vertical axis, I have just output. So it's no longer output per person, but it's telling a similar story. The nice smooth line is the trend line. That shows you economic growth. And then the blue line, which kind of goes around the gold line, is showing you the actual levels of output. That is the total amount of goods and services produced in any given year. So there's a few things that I want you to see in that picture. I want to make sure I have my list so I remember what those things are. One is, let's see, down here, there's the 1930s and the 1940s. So the Great Depression of the 1930s doesn't look so big anymore because we're looking at an axis that runs from less than $1 trillion up to about $16 trillion. But the Great Depression of the 1930s was a decade-long period when the amount of output that was being produced in the economy was well below trend. So first you see a drop, the blue line goes down, so there's a decrease in how much output is being produced. There was less produced in 1930 in the United States economy than had been produced in 1929, less in 1931 than had been produced in 1930, and so on. And then the second thing that's here is World War II, when there's a big boom. So the production associated with World War II created a huge boom in output so that we were actually producing beyond, as you will, beyond the production possibilities frontier. That gold line, being on the gold line, being on the trend line, that corresponds to being on the production possibilities frontier. Having an actual GDP that's below the trend line, that corresponds to being inside of the PPF. And having a GDP that's beyond the trend line, that corresponds to having some level of output that's beyond the production possibilities frontier. During World War II, we were beyond the long-term trend, Because one, there were a lot of people in the labor force who would not normally be in the labor force. And so this trend line does not include the fact that there was a huge influx of women in the United States into the labor force in World War II, many of whom went into the labor force and then left the labor force at the conclusion of the war. There are a lot of people, a lot of those Rosie the Rivers, and you should go to the Rosie the River Museum in Richmond. It's right on the water near the Crane Lake Pavilion, which you might have gone to for a concert right next door, right by the big tree. The Rosie the River Museum, one of the things you'll learn is the women who had those really good riveting jobs, the really high-paying jobs in manufacturing, they were by and large women who had had job market experience before the war, and they were women who stayed in the job market and stayed in the labor force after the war. But there was additionally a huge influx of women into the war during World War II who then left. Having that extra labor force, UPA folks, I think you're filing out. Having that extra labor force allowed for production beyond the PPF. So it's sort of like a temporary boost to the labor force that allowed production beyond the PPF. So that's one thing to notice. Another thing, which page am I on? I'm on this page. Another thing to notice is that we're not often on the trend line, that we fluctuate around the trend line. So the GDP is below trend, it's above trend, here it's above trend, here's at the trend, and then ooh, ouch. And then we have more recently definitely producing below the trend line. Okay. All right. So what are some definitions? When we talk about total output in the short run, so when I'm talking about total output in the short run, I'm talking about the blue line. So we're talking about not generation to generation, which is what's captured by that trend line or the gold line up there, but what's happening, say, year to year, which is captured by our blue line. When we talk about total output in the short run, we've got some definitions. I'm going to draw a picture over here. I'm going to put output on the vertical axis, and again time, 1970, 71, 72, 73, so years, along the horizontal axis. And then I'm going to draw something like that. And this is going to be showing what's happening to output over time. The amount of output that's produced goes up, and it hits some peak. So the top point there we call the peak. And then it comes down, and it hits what we call a trough, T-R-O-U-G-H, trough. The period in between the peak and the trough is a recession, R-E-C-E-S-S-I-O-N. So a recession is a period during which output is declining, during which the amount of output that's being produced in the economy is going down. There's less produced in 1931 than was produced in 1930. There's less produced in 1930 than was produced in 1929. So a recession is that period during which the amount of output is going down. And then, starting at the trough, as the economy goes back up, the economy is said to be in recovery. So recovery is the period that starts after the worst of things, after the trough, and as the amount of output that's being produced increases, we call that the recovery. I'm going to come back and define depression in just a minute. So recovery is the period during which output is increasing. Notice that recovery is not the same thing as recovered. Anybody who's been in the hospital for surgery, they finish up your surgery and they roll you into the recovery room. When you're in that recovery room right after you have surgery, you feel like going out and dancing when you're in the recovery room? Probably not. You feel pretty crummy, right? I was going to say crappy, but I think they left. I can say crappy because high school students don't. You feel pretty crappy, right? You feel pretty bad when you're in that recovery room, but you're better than you were. You're on the road to being recovered. So recovery means we're past the worst of things. We're past the trough. That output is starting to increase again. Recovery is not the same as recovered. There's two different definitions that people use, and you just have to sort of watch for context. Two different definitions of recovered. One definition of recovered is go from your peak and dash over until you hit that line of the business cycle line again. So that's one definition of recovered, when output gets back to the level it had at the previous peak. A second definition of recovered is if you put in here some sort of a trend line. So imagine that that's your blue line that's sort of fluctuating around the trend, which in our previous picture was the gold line. So my dashed line is the trend line. The other definition of recovered is when the economy gets back to the trend line. So those are two different definitions. Two definitions of recovered. So we're in recovery when we are on the upswing. When is the economy fully recovered? You just, whatever you're reading, you have to read it for context. So you have to figure out whether the context of that is they're looking at getting back to previous peak or getting back to trend. A depression is not a well-defined economic term. Depression is a term that journalists use. Depression is a term that people use. It's not a term that economists use, which I guess means economists are not people. It's not a term that economists use. It doesn't have a precise definition. So is what we started experiencing in 2007 a depression? We're the wrong people to ask. Economists are the wrong people to ask. So generally a depression is a really long recession followed by a really slow recovery. You can think of a depression as a time period when it's taking a really, really, really long time for the economy to be recovered. Certainly the 1930s. There we go. Certainly the 1930s were a depression. Everybody agrees that was a depression. In fact, we call it the Great Depression because if you look at where we were in 1929, the economy doesn't get back to the unemployment rate that it was experiencing in 1929 until early in 1942. We don't get back to trend line until 1942. So it's a full 12 to 13 years of economic distress. The recovery started here in March of 1933. So the economy started improving in March of 1933, but we didn't get back to baseline until either 1940 if you're going by previous peak or 1942 if you're going by trend. And so because it was a full decade of economic distress, people do call it the Great Depression. So not clear whether or not what we're going through is going to wind up being called the second depression or the depression of the aughts. I don't know what they would call it. The other one was the depression of the 1930s because it was over the decade of the 30s. This one started in December 2007. It's not clear. It's a moniker that will be given in retrospect, so at some point it'll become common to call it or not call it a depression. These days, most people call it the Great Recession. So to say this is worse than a run-of-the-mill recession, we call it the Great Recession of 2007 to 2009. Okay, clicker question. Do you know anyone who lost their job during that downturn? There's obviously no right answer to this question. Do you know anybody who lost their job during the 2007-2009 downturn? I'm going to guess for most of you A is not the answer because in 2007 you were like 12, so losing your babysitting job, maybe that should count. I guess that could count. Family member, B, friend of yours or friend of the family, some combination of nobody you know. 3 seconds. 1, 2, and 3. Whistle later if you would. All right, what do we got?